Tell me about your father, Audrey, please.
Well, my dad was called Jim Cheshire, and he was the youngest of a family of 6 who lived in Clandown. The eldest was a girl and the others were boys, and his father was a miner and all the boys became miners. His mother died when he was 16, after his brother had been killed in the Battle of the Somme, his brother Mark. So he was destined to go in the mine anyway, Dad was. And at first he started working when he was about 13 or 14, working on the screens for it, middle pit, cleaning the coal, until he was old enough to go underground with his dad. And that just continued, working in middle pit, I think, mostly. And eventually he moved to Ludlow's colliery at the bottom of Froome Hill.
He wasn't called up with his brother?
His brother wasn't actually called up. His brother, although he was a miner, I suppose he thought life in the army would be better, and he joined underage, much to his mother's chagrin really, and went away, and he was killed in the Battle of the Somme. He could only have been about 17 then. Dad continued in the mine because there was really no other opportunity for people, for boys then, either farm work in the area or being a miner, and that was all he knew and all his family knew. And I think he used to work mainly in the pit bottom, tramming empties, as they say, pushing things along on the haulage. But later in life, he took some qualifications and became an overman or a deputy in the mine, which was a degree of responsibility for him then. But he didn't complain. I mean, he just accepted that was his life, getting up at 4:30 in the morning. Mum didn't complain either. She used to get up and cook him a breakfast before he went to pit. He used to take jam sandwiches to eat in what they used to call their snap time, and he used to take a bottle of water, but unfortunately he fell on his bottle when they were early married and cut the tendons on his thumb. So really his thumb was no use to him after that. It was there, but of no real use to him. So after that he took a proper enamelled tin container for his drink. He was a very quiet man, a very shy man, and he liked his animals, he loved his dogs, and gardening. I think that was a necessity, because if you didn't grow lots and lots of vegetables, you didn't eat if you didn't have a lot of money. So all the miners we had a very large back garden stretching between Waterloo Road and Waldegrave Terrace above, and that used to be full of vegetables. And he also had an allotment later on at the bottom of Ham Hill. So home from work, dirty. He used to come home black in his pit clothes. I think he used to have his dinner first, which was, Mum had everything always ready for him, because he was the breadwinner, and you had to look after him, and he always had to have the best of what we could afford. And then he would have his bath in the zinc bath, which was very small bath. You couldn't get in and sit down. He used to kneel by the bath, like all the miners used to, wash their hands and their bodies and their face, and then get in the bath and kneel in the bath and wash themselves over. And that was all done in front of the kitchen fire. The water had to be heated. There's no means of heating water on the fire, so Mum had kettles and saucepans ready for when he came home from work to do that. And then the bath had to be lifted outside the back door to a drain to be emptied. And that was, and then perhaps he might have a little nap, and then he would go off and do his gardening.
Someone was telling me that the miners would all get quite a greyish pallor because they didn't see much daylight in the winter time.
Yeah, he was a fair-skinned man anyway, so yeah, he wasn't a very robust-looking man. When Dad was young, in the epidemic, I suppose that was 1918 flu epidemic, he caught flu very badly and had what they called then double pneumonia and had to be taken to hospital in Bath. And he had a very large scar under his ribs at the back, where they drained his lung, I suppose. And the thing he could remember about being in hospital was he longed for some cold water from the spring that came out of the wall in Clandown opposite their house. So they used to take him some spring water to drink. And anyway, he recovered from that. And but this big scar on his back, I can remember when we used to wash his back when he was in the bath, seeing this huge hole really in his back. You know, it was quite fascinating in an unusual sort of way.
So you would help him wash his
Sometimes,
back?
I mean, when the top of him, but then when it came down here, you went into the other room, right? Yeah, very modest. I mean, I think men and women were there, weren't they? Yeah. So yeah, that's how he used to go on. Yeah.
Now, when he injured his thumb, did that inhibit his work at all?
No, I think he managed. I mean, there's no compensation I mean, it was his own fault really for taking a bottle, but he was always very careful afterwards that we children should not carry glass bottles or jars. In fact, I did once at school I took a jar to the cloakroom when I was in the council school to wash out the flower jar and cracked it and split myself there. And, you know, the headmaster had to take me to the doctor and I had quite a wound there. But that was just one of those things, wasn't it? But he was always very annoyed to think that I'd been allowed to do that at school, knowing the dangers himself, yeah.
Now, you were saying that in his career, it eventually led to a rather serious injury.
He
eventually had a rather serious injury from work.
Well, yes. Now, whether it was an accident or whether it was constantly working, pushing, using his back, because the seams were so small, 18 inches, 2 feet seams. I don't know, just the nature of the work, I think. And probably up, you know, when I was married in the 50s, he used to be home from work a long time then with pain with his back, lying about, unable to move really. Yeah.
So how did that, was he already working as a deputy?
No, he was a deputy then. And I think after that, then he went to be a training officer, really.
Where was he doing that?
He was doing that at Great Mills Colliery, which was open then, which is opposite where Focus is now. And I think he used to enjoy the young lads, because they used to play him up a bit, but he used to enjoy it. Yeah.
When was that he started working there then?
Well, actually, it must have been in the 50s, I think.
So after nationalisation?
Yeah. Oh, yes, after nationalisation. And I can remember, when I was talking about him coming home black from work. I mean, when I was a little girl, I used to walk along Waterloo Road to meet him, and his lips, their lips always used to show very, very red, and the face very black. And he would have his cap on still with his carbide light in it, and come home in this very dirty clothes, as I say. And then Mum used to have to do all the washing, of course, that led to as well. But I think also of our neighbour who had 6 or 7 sons in the mine, and she had that coming home every day to see to. How she managed, I don't know.
Amazing. No
conveniences at all.
Now, were you still at home when nationalisation happened? Or?
I was, yes.
Do you remember that very, very well? Or?
First of all, I can remember going to see the Pithead Baths, because that was quite a day. And to think, you know, they were going to have a shower. They were all very modest, I think, at first. They used to wear a lot of shorts, the men. But after a while, they got used to being naked, you know, and having a shower, because I don't suppose any of them had had a shower before, being used to the tub in front of the fire. And that, having the Pithead Baths were a godsend, both to him and to Mum and to all other wives who had to deal with that.
So you actually went round to visit them?
Oh, went to see the baths, yeah. Oh, yeah, where everybody went on the opening of the baths.
Quite an occasion.
Oh, yeah. Quite special. And there was an outbreak, I remember. They used to get athlete's foot very badly through walking about and catching it probably from one another in the baths. And then for a while they all wore wooden clogs, like pattens, just something to slip their feet in so they wouldn't actually be touching the concrete floor, and to try and stop this awful athlete's feet, which was very, very annoying because it was very itchy between the toes. It used to get very raw, yeah.
Did your dad ever comment about the nationalisation at all? Did he ever express an opinion?
Well, he was a socialist, a Labour man, and he was pleased, you know, that it had happened. He thought it was right, because they hadn't been treated very well before that. I mean, life was very rough, really. As I say, we were used to the standards that we had, and we expected no better. But life was rough and hard for everybody. So I think they hoped that things would be better after that.
So you were saying about the privileges miners had with soap?
Yes, during the war, because soap was rationed and you needed tokens to buy towels, so you didn't buy many towels. The miners were allowed to have, you could actually buy them, I think, at the pit. I mean, they weren't top quality, but they were towels. And they used to get a number of towels and soap, which was quite a help. Yeah.
So it was, for other people, it was actually rationed. You had to be quite
Oh,
careful
yes.
with your soap.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about your mum.
Mum was, well, Dad was the youngest of 6 or 7, and Mum was the oldest. She had 5 brothers below her. She lived in Bath. I think her father worked at Stoddart Pit's cranes, because I think also lots of her brothers went to work there afterwards. Because she was the oldest, she had the roughest life, because her mother used to work in her mother's little laundry. Now, a laundry in those days was you had a bath on the table and you had a copper boiler, and you scrubbed the clothes and you put them in the boiler to boil, took them out and rinsed them, starched them, did everything to them to make them look lovely. And because my grandfather, who worked at Stoddart Pits, liked to drink rather than provide for his family, Mum, when she was older, and Gran used to have to go to the works on payday to get money from him before he went to the pub to drink it away. So Gran had to work very hard, and she worked, as I say, in her mother's laundry, which meant that Mum became the mother and the house worker and for the boys, really. And they must have been desperately hard up, because Mum remembers going to the baker's late at night to get a bag of stale bread, going to the butcher's to get a bag of pieces or bones, and Gran would then make a big stew or something like that with lots of vegetables for them, pig's ears, you name it, they used to eat. And I suppose they thought that was a good meal when something like that happened as well. So, as I say, Mum had a very hard life. Probably not as hard as her mother, because her mother was having these children as well. But my grandmother thought, rather fortunately, one day my grandfather got drunk and went with a mate to a recruiting centre and signed up and got a king's shilling, or queen's shilling, whatever it was then, and came home, and realising what he did, you know, he'd signed up to go into the army, cried, and he wanted his wife to go and get him out of his fix. But she said, no way. So he went off to India, which meant she was left with a family, but she had a regular army pay coming in, which made life a lot simpler for her then. Although it wasn't great money, it was some money that she had. So, as I say, Mum helped her mother, and she did various jobs when she left school. Oh, school was very hard for her as well, because she used to have to take grandfather's breakfast to work. Now why, I don't know. So she was late for school, and because she was late, she would have the cane on her hand because she was late. But in a way, she enjoyed school, and she was a very good reader, and she could recite poetry that she learned at school. I think then a lot of people learnt things by rote, and right into old age she would recite these poems. She was good at mental arithmetic, so I suppose if you went shopping and you had to watch your change, you know, all that naturally came to her. When she left school, she went into various jobs. She worked for a baker, where she had to put the horse's bridle on, and she was frightened of horses, but she had to take the bread round in a bread cart. She went to various jobs as a maid or whatever. But one thing I forgot to say, when Granny had the laundry, Mum would take the clean washing in a pair of trucks back to the big houses in Bath, perhaps to the Crescent, and she lived in Twerton then, so it's quite a long way, back to the circus or the Crescent, to doctors' wives, solicitors' wives, middle class people who could afford to send their washing to the laundry and have it made beautiful, because it was starching, everything was very immaculate when it was done. And one thing which you may or not be interested in, people used to send their babies' nappies to be washed, and sanitary towels then, because there were no bought sanitary towels, so terry toweling towels were sent along to be washed by the laundry, which, you know, we find it very hard to imagine how things were then. Anyway, that's what she did.
Do you know how she met your father?
I don't, and this is puzzling me a bit. I think she had a cousin who was a little bit older than her, Mabel, and I think probably Mabel used to go out and meet the boys, and I suppose the boys from Clandown used to come into Bath for a treat or, you know, just to have a look round. And I have a feeling that she met Dad then, because she was working at a house in either Box or Bitton at the time. The big house belonged to the Honourable somebody then, and I think that's where they met. And afterwards she moved to work in Radstock, to the manager of the mine, his house, South Hill House in Radstock, which is now the Radstock College, right? And she was a housemaid cook there. And Mrs. McMurtry looked after her very well and taught her many things, sewing, cooking, and she was a very kind employer, I think. But Mr. McMurtry was a rather hard taskmaster and rather mean, and you know, he liked things done just so. Yeah.
Did she carry on working there after she married? Or?
No, it's odd then. Although people were so hard up, not many women went out to work. You were a wife, and you were expected to be home looking after your husband. And I think that, to me, that's quite hard to realise now, because women now accept going out to work to bring in some money, don't they? Or they can. And she was married, they were married for 2 years and no offspring came along. And that was at the time when Bernardists were in the area looking for foster parents for their children. And they decided to take two girls, Muriel and Joyce. And when they had Muriel, she was 6, they were sisters, and Joyce was 3. And very soon after they had Muriel and Joyce, they knew they were going to have me. So they had the opportunity, they could have sent them back, but Dad said, no, let them stay. So that's how they came to be our family.
Did Bernardo's give them any support for
Oh
that?
yes, you had, I think it was a monthly allowance, a food allowance, and I think once a quarter there was some clothing allowance as well. Not a lot, but enough to help you on the way.
So they had the 2 girls?
They had the 2 girls, yes. Muriel and Joyce. Very brown-eyed, dark-haired girls. Very much loved, because Dad was really struck on Muriel. He liked Muriel very much. But she had learning difficulties from what I have gathered, and she was put into a school or a home in Bath, where we visited her once, but we didn't see her anymore after that. And Joyce, of course, stayed with us. Bernardo's, used to come and inspect the home about once in 3 months, I should think. But the awful thing was, I used to think, well, when I was old enough to think, was that they used to go to school and the Bernardi children were pulled out from the class or taken out from the class to be questioned and measured by the inspector from Bernardi. So they were marked out because they didn't take your family name, they kept their own surname as well. So they were always marked out as Bernardi children. And then they would come to your home and have discussions with your parents. And I can remember once they came and this was a later girl, not one of these, we had another girl later on. She hadn't gained enough weight. And I can remember this woman then sort of rapping her pencil on the table, saying this child should be heavier, you know, she's underweight. And she said, if I put another pencil, well, Mum said she's got taller, you know, she hasn't put a lot of weight. She said, well, if I put another pencil on top of this one, that would weigh twice, wouldn't it? So it wasn't an easy thing to do, really.
That's now, were the girls originally from London? Do you know?
Yes, they were from London, yeah.
Did they have any contact with their
None at all, and that wasn't encouraged. And I think when Joyce was married, her in-laws suggested that she might try to find her parents, but I think it led to a dead end, really. I think her father had put several children in a home, but we never heard any more about that.
What happened to Joyce?
Joyce, as I say, she was a maid. She came when she was 14, like all Bernardi children, they were taken back to the home to be trained, which meant they were trained to be servants, I think. And Joyce was to be trained to be a servant, but then that was the time of the war where Bernardus found it quite hard to place children. And we heard of a vacancy in a house in Charlton House, where Colonel and Mrs. Main lived. So Mum and I went there to see if they needed a girl, and they employed Joyce as a housemaid. I think she was there. She was there some time, but she got fed up with it, and then she joined the Land Army. And from the Land Army, I think she was billeted on a farmer in Oak Hill, on a farm there, worked there for some time, and eventually married the farmer's son. And, you know, we're still in contact with her. I mean, she's part of our family. And she has 3 children. Her husband is now dead, but she has 3 children, which we know well.
So she feels like a sister to you, then?
She's my sister, yeah.
And how much older is she than you?
She's 3 years older than me, yeah.
Well, so they were quite young girls when they came?
They were 3 and 6, yeah. Babies, really. And we did, later on, after Joyce had gone and was grown up, when I was 7, we had another girl called Jean, and I don't know how it was arranged, but she was sort of brought to the station, came on the train, and a glove came out the window of the train. The child was handed over, and you took this 4-year-old child into your home, and that was it. And she stayed with us until she was in 6th form at Norton Hill Grammar School. And then I don't know what happened then, but she decided she wanted to be away, and she contacted Bernardus, I think, and went away back to them. But she did contact Mum and came to stay sometimes after that, but then it all went away. So I don't know what happened in the end.
So you were saying about how the money was given to your parents?
Yes, you had to go to the rector's house, the rectory, which in Radstock is where Radco is now, and it had very big grounds right down to Somerville Road, and maids were kept there. So I used to be very intrigued when I went with Mum to collect the money for once a month or 2 months, whenever the money was paid from Bernardus. You go to this big house, and a uniformed maid would open the door, and you'd be ushered into the hall, which had a fire burning in, you know, quite different from Waterloo Road. And Mum had to sign a book, and then she would be given the money that she was entitled to for looking after the Bernardo children.
Were there many Bernardo's children here in
There were
Rexdale?
quite a number, actually. Yeah, one of our neighbours also had two Bernardo girls. Who, yeah.
Really? So, how many bedrooms did you have in the house on Waterloo Road?
We had two. I mean, all the houses we were in the middle rank in Waterloo Road. They had, the middle 10 houses had 2 bedrooms, and the end houses had 3. But the last but one house, which ours was in each end of the house, had a downstairs room which went under the bedroom, the 3rd bedroom of the other house. Ask me, I don't know why. We had 2 fireplaces, which the middle houses only had 1. And we also had I think all houses had a grate in the bedroom, which was nice when you were ill in bed. So you were allowed to be in that bedroom if you were ill in bed with a little fire burning in the grate. But there was there was a black-leaded stove in the kitchen. And I think the stove in the front room was also black-leaded. No water. Originally, the 12 houses had 1 tap between them, which was set in the middle of the rank, in a wall in the middle of the rank outside the back. Then that was extended, and there were 2 more taps put. So between our house and the house next door, there was a tap in the wall. And that's where you got your water. Toilets, but there was a wash house, which again was along the backyard, up a flight of steps. There was a wash house there, and at the back of the wash house were 5 lavatories. And when my mother went there to live, she had to share a lavatory with this big family next door, which for a young bride was not nice. But I have a feeling there was a bread oven originally in the wash house. There were 2 copper boilers there and a jutting out piece, which I believe had been a bread oven, which then in turn was turned into a toilet for the end house. So everybody then had their own lavatory, flush lavatory. But it was a nightmare. You can imagine if you had to go to the toilet, everybody knew where you were going. If you had diarrhea, everybody knew where you were going, what was going on. But that was the way it was.
I guess you had parties at night, did you?
Parties?
Bed parties, did they call them?
Oh, yes, we had pots,
Yeah.
pots for the night. But if it was serious and you needed to go to the toilet properly,
Yes.
Dad, I need to go to the toilet, and poor Dad would get up and take us. And it was candle. We had a candle to go with. And, I mean, eventually I suppose we had a torch, but I can remember going with a candle. And I can remember one of our neighbours' girls saying, you know, when you pour the flush, a ghost comes up out the lavatory. So the thing was to get out the door and pour the flush and run. But that was it. In the house, originally, it was paraffin lamps. I can remember when I was little, it was paraffin lamps. And then the gas board, or the gas company, put in gas light and a gas ring, which made, if you were making custard, made it a lot easier than trying to cook it over an open fire, because all our food was cooked over the open fire. And a few years after that, the electric company offered, I think, two lights, or 2 or 3 electric lights and 1 power point, which we had done. And I can remember certain of our neighbours were a bit anxious about having electricity in and thought, you know, perhaps we won't have it done yet. But that's what we had. We had 2 lights, 1 power point.
Was that before the war?
I think it must have been. Yeah, it must have been, yeah.
And would they keep, I guess the kitchen fire would be kept burning most of the day?
Yeah, all day. Big oven at one side. And also in there, we used to keep, when we weren't cooking in it, Dad used to keep sticks for lighting the fire, because they used to come home, miners, with what they used to call a chump of wood, block of wood about that big, which I suppose was the end of a pit prop, and they used to chop it up, put it in the oven to dry so it'd be ready to light the fire when needed. But mostly I suppose they would try to keep it in overnight, but not always. If it went out, it went out. And of course it was a filthy job in the morning. You had all these ashes and blackleading the grate. I mean, it was great pride to women to have this blackleaded grate looking beautiful like velvet. And, you know, Mum would get up and blacklead this hot grate. And I've done it as well. Yeah, for her.
But the grates up in the bedrooms would only be used if you
were ill.
If you're unwell.
Yeah, otherwise you were cold. It was cold. Yeah.
And the three of you, the three girls, all
slept in the bath bedroom. Yeah, we slept in the back bedroom. Yeah. Yeah, and you washed on the kitchen table. You had a bowl, and heated the water on the fire, and you washed on the kitchen table. And I regret to say we had a bath once a week because it was such a problem having got water for Dad for a bath. Well then, you know, bath night was Friday night. And I think we used to take it in turns because there was not, you know, there's just no means of heating enough water. And bath night was syrup of figs night as well.
What was that in aid of?
To make, you had to go to the toilet properly. So everybody had a dose of syrup of figs on Friday night, which meant you were running along the back to the toilet next morning. It was considered to be healthy.
Did you see a dentist regularly when you were little? How did that work?
Not until school dentists. And I can remember, I think I can remember Dad losing his teeth, having to have them out because they were all so painful. And Mum's teeth, they went when she was about 40 as well. But my mother-in-law, she used to say in the North Country that before a woman was married, she had her teeth out and some artificial teeth put in so that she wouldn't be money on her husband. That was an asset if you had artificial teeth. Really? It's hard to think, isn't it?
Yeah. And what about did you know your doctor's name? Can you remember his name?
Sorry?
Your general practice, your GP?
We had a doctor, yes, and he was in what's now Lee House at the bottom of Wells Hill. And he had a surgery which it's not there now, it went out the side of the house, like a glass area, up in the air really. I don't know how it worked. It was very cold there, and you would go there to the doctor. The doctor was a very austere man, I can remember, and of course you didn't call the doctor to your house unless it was desperate because you had to pay. And I think I was quite ill when I was young with bronchitis or something. And this man used to come, very properly dressed in wing collar, very proper suit on, very cold hands, I can remember now, very cold hands. And as I say, he would do what he had to do. But he was held in such high esteem because of his position. We had 2 white towels, and that were the only white towels we had. And I think probably they were the ones Mum had when I was a baby. And they were kept for when the doctor came. And a bowl would be brought to the bedroom for him to wash his hands. But you didn't send for the doctor unless you were desperate because of having to pay. I think miners had a club or something so that if Dad was ill, he could go to the doctor with less trouble.
Yeah, because someone was telling me that they funded the hospital at Poulton, didn't they?
Yes, we had one of my father's brother's wives. She had been a school teacher at Clandown, like a pupil teacher. She hadn't been to college, but she was quite astute. And she used to collect money for Porton Hospital. And I can remember her coming to our house and with the book, collecting money for them.
That was on a charity basis,
yeah,
was it?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the life on the street. You say you knew everyone quite well, is that right?
You do. I mean, people were there. You thought this was life and that's how it would always be. The neighbours were always the same. Very, very few houses changed hands. as I say, we had a very large family of miners living next door to us. And how their mother managed, I don't know, providing the water for their washing and doing their laundry and everything. She had a very hard life. She was a dear old soul. She would knock, people didn't go in out of people's houses. They would knock on the door, perhaps put their head around the door. Mum used to say, if she hadn't seen Mum, she would come round and say, knock on the door, how are you, my child? All right. And that would be it. An interesting thing about this family next door, I think he worked on the roads and her sons, as I say, worked in the mine. Her daughter had gone away to service. But they used to buy cockles and winkles from somewhere, and they used to come on the train, and a porter used to bring them in a sack to their house some late in the week, and they used to soak them, and they had a big sort of garden hut outside, and then they used to sell them in Radstock Market, outside the market. They had a store there. But one of our cats used to go round and get in amongst the cockles and steal the cockles, so our cat was always in trouble. But they had a son that died from tuberculosis, because I suppose that was a very difficult thing to cope with if you had a large family living in crowded conditions. And he did go away to a sanitarium down on the Quantocks. That was the expression. If you went down on the Quantocks, you know there was TB about. And he did come home to die. And one altercation I remember between our neighbours was that this young man, he'd come home from the sanitarium. He'd gone outside to clean his teeth under the tap, which was between our house and the next door house, which was also shared by the next door house. And the lady in the next door house was so annoyed that this chap with TB had cleaned his teeth under the tap. She came out with a kettle of boiling water and poured it over the tap. And of course the father was so irate that she'd done that, you know. And after that, and there's such a row. We didn't have many rows, but there was a row. And after that, somehow he managed to get a tap put into his house.
Oh, really?
So that his son could clean his teeth or wash inside. Yeah. And Tommy died eventually at the house, yeah.
Was he about your age?
He was older than me. They were all older than me, yeah, because they were grown up when I was there. And the lady on the other side, she'd come up from Shoscombe to live next door to us before we went there. And her husband and daughter had both died in the flu epidemic. And she was left with several children. I think 2 of her daughters were away in service, but she had a son working at Braesdown Colliery who actually wore the Gus and Crook, and another son working in the glove factory in Combe End. And she was desperately short of money. She had nothing coming in. And there used to be a parish man come round, and you'd ask him for money. And, you know, could we have some shillings for this or shillings for that? And he says, you've got a sewing machine there, sell that. And, you know, that's how that was making her clothes for her children. She used to take in washing from the Wardegrave Hotel to help make money, and desperately poor. But always, at the end of wash day, she always used to sing, little man, you've had a busy day. Every wash day, you knew when she was finished. But, you know, she has such a hard life.
Must have been a hard place to keep secrets on the street.
Oh, you didn't. And perhaps this shouldn't be on there, but as part of my sex education, because sometimes the women would stand outside and talk, just occasionally have a chat. And she used to say about her husband, she said, I don't know, Mrs. Chedley, because women always used to call each other by Mrs. It was always very formal. She said, every time Wart put his trousers on the bed, I had a baby. And I used to think, how was that? It took me a long time to find out, you know, but that was it. But you didn't really have very close secrets. But as I say, people didn't used to go in and out people's houses without invitation or without knocking on the door.
So quite formal about it.
Very formal. And my father or the men would refer to their wives as my missus. I never heard my dad call my mum by her name, because when we were little it was always our mum. Not mum, our mum. Go to your mummy. And he always called her my missus. And his workmates used to come and speak to her, Mrs. Chedgie. It was always Mrs. Chedgie.
Now, did you find that when you went up to university that you had to alter your way of speaking at all, or
Well,
was that something you might have done consciously or unconsciously?
no, I don't think so. I think you gradually get into it, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, now I often think of mum and dad's phrases and say them quite naturally, you know, and sometimes I must sound very Somerset, very Radstock, and sometimes I don't, because somebody at college said to me the other day, "Where did you come from?" I said, "Guess, you know where I come from." She said, "No, you haven't got an accent." I said, "I have." And she was surprised, you know, but some people pick it up better than others, don't they? Yeah.
Now, the cinema was down at the end of your road, wasn't it? Or just across the way? The cinema at
the other end of the road.
Yeah. Did you go to the
Oh,
cinema?
yes, Saturday afternoon. Yeah, penny, I think it was a penny. And it was a heck of a row, because the kids used to shout and cheer, stamp their feet. But it was really children's cinema I went to. Very rarely, when I was a child, did I go to a real proper cinema in Bath.
Would that be silent films then? Or when you were very little,
they're talking films then. Yeah.
What kind of films would they be then? Do you recall?
Cowboys, I suppose, and I can't really remember now. But I know Frankenstein, the old Frankenstein, and really old, funny, stupid films like that. Yeah.
Did your parents go to the market very much?
Oh yes, I mean market day, Saturday, we were not Dad, because Dad didn't go shopping. Mum and I or the others would go shopping in the market, and you buy the cheese store inside the door, and you buy cheese there. There was everything there. In fact, my uncle, Dad's one of his brothers, used to stand for a jeweller who came from Bath. Stand, you know, he was an assistant there. Miner in the week stood for Mr. Johnson on Saturdays, and I believe, I can only assume that my mum's wedding ring came from there, which I have now.
Do you?
Yeah.
Really? Wow. Now, of course, in those days, you wouldn't go shopping in Bath, I expect, or not very often anyway.
My gran lived in Bath, so Mum and I, or the others, used to go on the train to Bath, because the train was so easy. Go to the end of the road, get on the train, and I suppose it was fairly cheap. Go on the Bath, and we used to walk from the station to Twerton to Gran's house. Sometimes we used to go on a tram. The trams were running there. And occasionally we'd go shopping in Bath, yeah. And perhaps later on, you know, when I was a bit older, Mum and I used to go in on the train.
Did you shop at the Co-op very much?
Oh, yes. I mean, shopping, I think, was almost a daily thing then. Because you only took a small shopping bag or basket with you. And when I think about it now, we used to go in, you asked for a quarter of a pound of butter or something, and the assistant used to write down 1/4 pound butter at so much a pound, and then the final price. Of course, it was all pennies, halfpennies, farthings, and that used to be on a blue sheet that, you know, used to go through the paper. I can't remember what it's called now.
Oh, the carbon paper?
Carbon paper, yeah. And so your shopping list was written out. I mean, how they had time to do it, knowing how frantic Tesco's is now.
Yeah.
Used to go and used to get your bits of shopping like that, and your bacon.
And it would be mostly on account, would it? Or would you be paying cash?
Oh, you pay cash.
Right.
And it had one of those things up in the roof that the money went into the office, you know, pull a thing and whoops, it would go along, then the change would come back.
Oh, is that
Do you know
right?
what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do.
Yeah.
The people at the counter wouldn't actually
They didn't
touch
handle
the
the
money?
money. No, they
Oh.
didn't handle the money.
Oh, centrally done, so to speak.
Yeah, and when you'd paid your money, you had to say your co-op number, which I now know. I know my 2 neighbours' number. I know a neighbour number that lived over there.
Do you still remember your number?
I still know them now.
Really?
Yeah, because I used to go shopping for them, you see, as well.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And the money that you spent was added up because you had what they call a share in the co-op. And I think once a quarter, the dividend would come out. Depending how things were, you either went and got the money, a small amount, a couple of pounds, I suppose, or you had it put on your bank book. That didn't happen very often. Or you get a docket and you go to another co-op shop and buy some towels or a pair of shoes. And it was very important. And this co-op office was in the building opposite the Victoria Hall now. Do you know what I mean? Where the post office is now. And on the corner used to be a door, and you used to go up the stairs there to the co-op office to get your divvy.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So quite a queue outside that door.
And Mum used to keep, I suppose everybody used to keep your replicas of the ticket in a tin so that you could add up, make sure you were getting your full whack at the end.
So there was quite an incentive to buy from the co-op.
Oh, the co-op, yeah.
But they still had other shops, I gather. I mean, there were other rival stores around.
Yeah, there was on the corner in Radstock where the photographer is now, there was a grocery and drink store there. I used to go shopping there for a neighbour. I think that was supposed to be a bit upmarket if you went there. But there were several other shops in Radstock, far more shops than there are now. Yeah.
Now, did you have any part-time jobs yourself or anything like that when you were?
No, only I used to go shopping, baby minding. I used to like baby minding.
Quite a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking after other people's children. Yeah.
Right. And what about the Girl Guides or anything like that? Did you join?
The girl.
Girl Guides or Brownies?
I wasn't really allowed to join. My dad, he didn't want me. I remember once there was during the war there was a girls' training corps, which was akin to the cadet corps, but Dad wouldn't allow me to go to that.
Oh, really?
No. He didn't want me to. He just didn't want me to do anything. He wanted to keep me at home, I think.
Do you remember how you felt about that? Were you upset?
I wanted to belong to that. Yeah, I did. Yeah, but I did belong. I mean, I used to go to church then, and there was a girls' society in the church which I belonged to, which I was, I was allowed to go to that, although neither Mum or Dad went to church.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, so you just went yourself on the Sunday?
I went with friends, yeah.
Which church was that?
St Nicholas in Radstock. Right.
So, of course, you were living near the railway. And
We were living absolutely as close to the railway as we could for safety, I think. And we used to get to know the drivers, both from the trains that used to come out from Bath, because there was a signal near our house where the trains often used to stop. So I used to get to know the drivers there. And of course there was a shunting station right outside our house. And from Mum's bedroom window, you could watch it going on all day, and we knew the men that worked there. And one amusing thing, really, at the end of the road when I was young, the co-op used to keep their horses for the milk carts and the bread carts. And so a man would fetch the horses, either fetch them in the morning, take them back at night in a group, say 6 or 7 big horses, walk them along the road. And if there was a train there, they would blow the whistle to make the horses jump. They used to do it for fun. I mean, the chappie leading the horses knew, and the train driver knew. And the horses used to rear up. Yeah. Oh dear, what a life. Yeah.
Of course, and in those days we're talking steam trains, so they're
very,
pretty dirty
very
business.
Dirty, yeah. Yeah, but yeah.
Did you would that be a problem with for your mum with the windows and things?
She never said. She never said. No.
And what about the noise coming through? Was that a?
I suppose we were just used to it. You just get used to where you live, don't you? Really. We never used to think about it.
Now, they took the lines out in the early 70s, so that was while you were away, I guess.
Yeah, we were gone then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And were your parents still in Waterloo Road when that happened?
Mum and Dad, now you'll have to work this out because they moved there in 1925 and they were there for 35 years.
Right, so that's 1960, is it? 55, 60, yeah, 1960.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so they were gone by the time. The
Yeah,
railway
they
was
moved to
up.
Ham then to
Yeah.
be with my father's brother and
Right.
look after him. Yeah.
What what did it feel like when you do you remember coming back to Radstock and seeing it without its station? Did it seem
Well, it
strange?
just seemed so strange, yeah, because you were used to waiting for the level crossing gates. You know, the 2 level crossing gates closed at once, and you just used to wait. And when the express went through, you used to jump, and if there was a horse there, the horse would jump. And that was it, yeah.
How does it feel now to see it? Does it seem like...
When I look at the model in the museum, I remember of the railway, you know, it just brings it all back. But I mean, the traffic in Radstock has got worse since then, because we used to say, oh, what if there were no level crossing gates, there would be no traffic hold-up. But of course, it's worse now. It's worse now.
Well, I remember one of the railway drivers telling me, he said when they closed the railway, nobody was upset about it. They were all quite pleased in some ways,
Well, I suppose it seemed a step forward.
Yeah.
But people now think, oh, it was nice just to hop on the train and go to Bath. And I think when the mines were closed, nobody was upset. I certainly would never be upset about that, because it's no way to live.
Yeah.
No way for a man to live.
Yeah, yeah. It is terribly easy to get nostalgic about it, isn't it? But
It is.
It was a hard time.
I mean, when they talk about it in glory, I mean, I think, you don't know. You don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Because although miners didn't take women underground here because it was considered to be bad luck, Ian and I have been down a deep pit in one of the mining museums up north. And, to be down there so enclosed in the dark with candlelight and no space to move for hours and hours on end, there's no way for a person to live, not at all.
No, I know what you mean. So, with the 3 girls sharing a room, how did you cope with schoolwork and things in those days?
Well, there were only two of us when I went to the grammar school, and I suppose I used to do it in the front room. And it was during the war, and schooling was so difficult then anyway. It was a bit of a hit and miss arrangement, what schooling we had, because we only went to school in the morning, because we had to share our school with a school from London. And I don't know, but I must have done some homework. I can't really remember where we used to do it. Yeah.
So you were at the grammar school when the war started?
Yes, yes.
Which grammar school was that now?
It's in Midsummer Norton, County Grammar School. It's the red brick building on the hill. And people are surprised now, because I started school when I was 3, but we all did. We went to Radstock Council School, which was at the top of Bath Ode Road, which I used to walk there, I suppose, 4 times a day, because you used to come home for lunch and walk back again. But a group of us used to go, neighbours' children used to go as well, and we used to go in a group. And I stayed there until I passed the scholarship to enable me to go to the grammar school. We had an indication that some of us were going to pass the scholarship because we had a representative of an encyclopedia company come to the school and talk to the headmaster. And when I got home from school on that particular day, he'd already been to our home to suggest that Mum and Dad bought this set of encyclopedias because I was earmarked as one of the few who were going to pass the scholarship. And he went to all the prospective passers' homes. And of course, Mum and Dad bought them, 5 bob a month, something like that, you know, a nice 10 set of Arthur Mee's encyclopedias. And I knew Mum particularly wanted me to go to grammar school, and it was quite important in our lives then. And we had 2 exams. We had to take one at school and then another one at the grammar school. And I think really that was to position us for which form we should be when we got to the grammar school. But on the day our headmaster at the council school had the news that 4 or 5 of us had passed, he got us all to his desk and he said, "You've passed, but don't go and put it in the paper." As though we'd done something not very nice. Anyway, I was very pleased. And I went home, and I can remember now, Mum was scrubbing the kitchen floor. And I said, "I didn't pass." And she said, "You did." I said, "Yes, I did." And from then I was just thrilled to think that I was going. And I was a bit annoyed that when war broke out, that upset our journey to school because the trains were stopped because we went by train. And it sort of interfered with our starting school, really, at the grammar school.
Oh, so you'd catch the train at Radstock, would
The
you?
train at Radstock and go to Norton Hill.
Right.
Yeah, and people came up from Shoscombe and Wellow as well to do that.
Now, it was quite an undertaking, wasn't it? Because you had to have a uniform and things.
Had to have a uniform. My cousin, in fact, my cousin's wife, and I visited her today, and she's 90-something, and she made my blouses for school, which were cheaper than, and I think she made us, oh no, we had to have a gym slip. So that was probably bought at the co-op. And we were very proud. Mum was very proud, and I was very proud going off to the grammar school, yeah.
Now, so the war had broken out.
The war had broken out in the September, and I started in the September.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So it messed things up quite badly, you were telling me.
Oh, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
it did. I mean, one good thing about going to the grammar school, they have a very excellent canteen there. We used to have good school dinners then. They were cooked on the spot, and we really enjoyed having a proper meal there. It was well cooked and good food, yeah.
And another school came down from London?
Yes,
was it?
from Highbury. It was Highbury Boys' School, and they shared the school, which meant they had, I think, either mornings or afternoons, and we would then go, if they were there in the morning, we would go to various halls. We went to Methodist Church Hall in Westfield, we went to Pratton's Social Club Hall, we went to the Salvation Army Hall in Midsummer Norton, you know, walk there for our lessons, and the teacher would come along. But of course that was quite hit and miss because you wouldn't have your equipment really.
So that was in the second half of the day then?
Yeah,
was it? You'd be
yeah,
in a little
yeah,
hall somewhere?
yeah,
Oh, I see.
yeah.
Right.
And very often there wouldn't be any transport back home because if you'd gone on the train, you'd have to walk home. Sometimes you get a bus. But when I was 14, I was allowed to have a bicycle. So that made life a lot easier then for me.
Did they have a library at the school then? Could you borrow books from them?
They had a library in a room at the school, yeah. I don't really remember, not until I was in the 6th form, actually bringing books home. I may have done. I think probably I did, but I can't remember a great deal about that.
Were there many books at home? Did your parents, were they great readers?
No, very few. I mean, Dad used to read the Daily Herald, that was his paper, and he used to take John Bull, which was a magazine. Mum used to have perhaps a woman's magazine, and perhaps she might get a book from a lending library, which was like a woman's novel or something like that. So we had a few books, but not many. She had a book of, I don't know where she got it, somebody gave her a book of Longfellow's poems, I've still got it, and she used to read about Hiawatha to me then. She used to like to do that. Yeah, but I mean, it couldn't be a very cultured home. We didn't have the facilities, and neither did they have the education to do it.
Did you have a radio?
Oh yes, Dad was very keen on the radio. I can remember, excuse me, he made a cat's whisker radio. whatever that might be, once. But we used to have a battery radio, and we used to have to take accumulators, I don't know what that was, a heavy thing. We used to carry to Coombe End, where there was a man who would charge them up. You carry them home again and put them in the back of the radio. I don't know how it worked. And then when we had electric, of course, we had a proper radio.
What was your favourite show?
Plays on Saturday night. We used to have a good radio play on Saturday night. In Town Tonight was a popular one. And used to have serials. That was another thing. I can remember listening to the Count of Monte Cristo as a serial. I think it was on children's radio. And Joyce was a sleepwalker. And one night I heard this sound at the bedroom window, and then a knock on the back door and crying, and she had jumped out of the bedroom window. She'd let herself out of the bedroom window because in the Count of Monte Cristo he'd got out through a window and she was crying and banging on the back door, and I said, "Mum, Dad, Joyce Binner fell out the window." Dad got out, I can remember it now, he rushed down the stairs. If only she'd only broken her leg, if only she'd only broken her leg. And they opened the back door, which was locked, of course, let her in, and she bruised her toe, and she was shaken up, but she was fine. And I think because she was asleep, she'd fallen it was a bedroom window, she'd fallen onto a asphalt backyard.
This was all dreaming about the Count, was it?
That was a dream. And after that, perhaps it was the beginning of my not sleeping very well. I mean, I used to be on pins. Yeah, and so a sort of lock was put on the bedroom door. They made a big frame to go over the window so it wouldn't happen again.
Now, did they issue you with a gas mask and things
Oh,
like that?
yes, you had to carry a gas mask everywhere with you to school. And everywhere around the schools you had your satchel and your gas mask.
Do you remember the air raids very much? Could you hear them in Bath and things?
Well, in Radstock, we had the first bombing before London. You know that, do you? And I remember getting up that morning, how stupid, to walk along to Radstock with a family in the early light of the morning to see what damage had been done.
Wow.
So...
Quite near your house, of course, in Warren Road.
Yes, across the middle of Radstock, yeah.
So was that in the night, that morning?
Yeah, it must have been early in the morning, very early in the morning.
Do you remember it waking you up? Or?
I thought it was thunder. You know, it felt like that, it woke us up. But we did, in the bombing of Bath, I don't know if because Mum and Dad were nervous, but we used to get up every night. And I didn't tell you this, but in our front room, there was a cupboard under the stairs, which was originally for storing coal, because we used to have coal delivered, an allowance of coal delivered, which was stored under the stairs. But by this time, Dad had built a place to put the coal in the front garden. So this cupboard under the stairs had been whitewashed out. And during the war, when the raids were on, she put a rug or something on the floor. We had seats in there, and we used to sit in there during the raids. The dog, everybody used to sit in there.
During the raids in Bath?
During the raids in Bath and Bristol.
Really?
Yeah, because they used to sound so frightening, you know, and we used to get up every night. And by this time, I don't know how we lived. My grandmother came to live with us as well.
From Bath?
From Bath,
Really?
yeah. So she used to be in the cupboard, and at one time we even had an evacuee from London. But she thought the raids were so bad that she went back to London. She only stayed 6 weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So they were really, the ones in Bristol were quite
They're quite frightening. And in fact, in order so that we could get some sleep, Mum and Dad brought some beds down and put them in this room that was under next door's bedroom. And we slept in there, all of us together. Well, I was with Mum and Dad, and Jean had another bed, you know, and Gran was upstairs in the front bedroom. Yeah.
Now, were there any privileges for a miner as far as rationing was concerned?
Yes, he had a meat ration, cheese ration, and I can't remember what else, but I mean, that would be easy to look at, wouldn't it, to find out. Yeah.
But I guess he had all that. You guys didn't benefit, I suppose.
Oh no, I mean, he had to be kept healthy. That was our livelihood, so he had to have first, and nobody begrudged him that, because I mean, that was what life, wasn't it? Yeah.
And with the rationing on, how did it work as far as school dinners were concerned? Did those continue, or do you
The
remember?
school's dinners continued, and I think that must have been a godsend, really, for us to have a proper dinner every day at school. Yeah.
Now, you were telling me something about the notebooks that you did during the war, which I thought was really quite extraordinary.
Yes, because paper was so short, we used to have to write in pencil to our notebooks, and then we would rub it out and perhaps write in a different direction, and then rub it out and write in ink.
So you'd use them 3 times over?
Use them 3 times, yeah.
My goodness.
And I really don't know how we were educated. I really don't know. We must have had excellent teachers.
Did you meet any of these grammar school boys from London?
No, oddly enough, although our school was a co-educational school and we had boys at the grammar school, when these glorious young men came from London, it was an all-boys school and we were not allowed to speak to them. Needless to say, we did, and relationships were formed, but it was very much frowned on, and you could get into trouble if you were found speaking to them. Although some of them were billeted in the homes of pupils at the grammar school.
I was going to say, yeah, I would imagine
Yeah,
they put them into different
Yeah.
homes, did they?
yeah,
Well,
crazy.
yeah. The I wanted to just ask you as well a little bit about what you did in your spare time. I mean, you mentioned to me that you'd listen to the radio and things like
Yeah,
that.
it's like the radio.
Now, you also told me about playing on the batches. That was quite a thing.
Yeah, now you were talking about batches last night, weren't we? And we call them batches, and they were treed over because they were not pointed batches, the old batches in Radstock. They were long batches and had been planted with trees. So really they were a recreation area. And when I was a little girl, I mean, that was the place you walk your dog. That was the place you go to play very often as well. And there was one batch at Tyning, which was of the new variety, which was a conical batch, like the one at Great Mills. And I can remember seeing the tubs being taken up and tipping automatically at the top on that. And one day a friend and I thought, well, we'll go up that batch, climb to the top. Well, I was nearly killed because it was very slippery. I mean, the stones just came down. I was halfway up and there was like an avalanche, and I just came down and got into great trouble at home for going up there.
Oh, bad.
Yeah, it's a very silly thing to do, and I was old enough to know better. But
So they'd already started planting them with trees when you were a little girl then?
when I was a little girl, they were planted. They were planted and growing. And in fact, quite a few Christmas trees found their ways from the batches to miners' homes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Found their way. And I was talking the other day, gambling was an illegal offence then. I don't know if it is now. No, I don't suppose it is. But men used to have card games, card scores on the side of the batches. And you could hear the men arguing on Sunday when they're playing cards and gambling, but they would be in trouble if the police caught them.
Really?
Yeah,
My
that was at
goodness.
Tyning, at Whitelands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, you were saying knitting was quite a big pastime as well.
Yeah, I used to enjoy and still I enjoy any handiwork. I've always did that, and I also played the piano.
You had a piano at home?
I had a piano. Mum, again, how she did it, I don't know, 10 bob a month, something like that, from a firm in Bristol. And we had the piano, and a local man, no, he was from Bristol, He used to come and give us lessons. Me and various other people in the area had lessons from him. And there was a blind man in Radstock who used to tune the piano, and he used to be able to come round to various houses, blind as anything, tune the piano. And he used to play the organ in church as well.
Really? Wow.
Wonderful, character.
Now, when you got older, you were telling me that you used to go on a day trip up to Bath.
Used to go into Bath, with my friend who lived in Wellow. Her uncle had a hairdressing business in Milsom Street, and he wanted models to practice on, for his girls to practice on. So she and I used to go, I think once in 3 weeks, and have our hair done. Then we would go to the British restaurant, which was near the Victoria Park in Bath, and have a meal which could only cost a certain amount of money. A dinner and a pudding. And then we might go to the theatre, to go up in the gods, see a play. And it used to be a great day. We used to love doing that, Absolutely lovely.
Now, of course, at that time, they had a lot of American forces around, didn't
Oh,
they?
yes, and of course we used to eye up the American soldiers, but we were only very young, so we were really out of their league.
Yeah.
But it used to be, quite something to see all these American soldiers there.
And I gathered there were a lot billeted in and around Radstock as well, right?
Not Americans, we had
no?
Welsh Guards and various others. In fact, there was used to have a workshop at the end of Victoria, at Waterloo Road, next to the red brick building there. There was a garage there, and they had a vehicle base or something there.
And of course, that was all leading up to those were the D-Day landing troops.
Yeah, I suppose it must have been.
Yeah.
It must have been.
Now, when you sat your school certificate exams, was the war still on, or had it ended by then?
Oh, the war was still on then.
Was it?
Yeah, it was I was 16, 19. Work it out.
In the later part of the war then? Was it?
Yeah. Because I think it finished, didn't it, at 45 when I was in the sixth form. Yeah.
Now, I know you did very well on that, and you actually passed and went on to university. That must have been quite a to-do around on Waterloo Road, wasn't it?
It was. This is when I got my, what we call A-levels now, but higher school certificate, and I was destined to go to university. And I was the only one, in my family we'd had 2 people who'd gone to teacher training college to be teachers, but I was the only one to go to university, and I suppose the only one in our road who'd ever heard of going to university. And one of the neighbours met me one day and said, "Oh, I'm so pleased to hear you're going to Oxford and Cambridge," because the boat race was the only notification that people had of universities, any knowledge they had of them. So I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge, I went to Nottingham.
Your mum must have been pleased as punch, was she?
She was pleased, but Dad wasn't keen. Dad said, "I don't know why she wants to go there, she'd get a nice job in the co-op." I don't think he wanted me to go away, because it was me going off into a different sort of life. And I suppose he worried about me as well, yeah.
Now, just give me an indication, because this was the county scholarship, wasn't it?
Yes, and I wasn't the only one. There were several of us were awarded county scholarships on the amount of marks we got in our higher school certificate. One girl did even better, and she got a state scholarship, which was even more money. But the money I got and the rest of us who won them got was enough to see me through university, both for tuition fees and maintenance. And I didn't work in the holidays.
Wow.
No.
What a privilege.
And I can remember the amount of maintenance. It was £56 a quarter or a term. And, at first I was in a hall of residence, which I didn't like. And then I went into digs, very well looked after for 37 and 6 a week, washing done, food done, everything done.
Now, do you know how many county scholarships there were around? I mean, were there a limit?
What
to
you mean in all? No, I
Yeah.
don't. I don't.
But this was quite a rare thing in those days.
It was, yeah, now whether it was because it was at the end of the war and they were trying to encourage more to go to university, I don't know the background of it at all.
But you were saying two or three of you did quite well.
Yeah,
From,
yeah.
How many do you recall? Do you recall how many got the scholarship?
At least 4 of us, I think, the year I got it.
Really?
Yeah.
So do you remember hearing that you got the scholarship? Do you remember getting the notice? How did it come to you?
Yes, I do. I believe I must have gone to school and been told at school that I'd got it, and probably had a letter from the county as well. And I remember, although we didn't have a phone at home, going to phone boxes and ringing up other people who'd been in the sixth form to see if some of them had got it as well. And a few of them had, and one girl I knew very well hadn't. So I was very pleased. And another thing, because when I'd applied to go to university, I could only go if I had embarked on a teaching course, because that was the only way you could get funding, if you agreed to be a teacher. And I didn't particularly want to be a teacher, but I did want to go to university. So when I knew I got this scholarship, I knew I was free then to go to university, get a degree, but I needn't necessarily be a teacher at the end of it. So it was like a release, really. Little did I know that later on I would become a teacher, and I really enjoyed being a teacher. But I think because I'd been brought up with the idea teaching is a wonderful job, you know, it's a wonderful profession, safe job, you know, it's a thing you aimed for. Because there was very little that women could do then. You could be a librarian, you could be a teacher. A few women were doctors, but you had to be extremely clever and well off to become a doctor. So it's the next best option, really.
Did you have any other ideas in mind yourself?
Not really. I wanted to go to university.
That was just the...
Yeah, really. Yeah. So I think because I'd enjoyed the work I'd done in the sixth form so much, and I knew that it opened lots of channels. But looking back now, I wished I'd done what they do now and taken a gap year, because I think I suppose with a lot of other people, I was too young really to go. I would have perhaps have benefited more going later on.
Now, were you 18 or 17?
I was 18.
18.
Just 18, yeah.
Very young, isn't it?
I'm very, very sheltered life I'd led, so.
Now, how did the selection process work? I mean, did they have a...
I applied, it wasn't as rigorous as it is now. I applied to, I think, London. I went to University College London for an interview, and I think that included the interview for Nottingham, because Nottingham University College was then a part of London University. So my degree was really a London University degree until Nottingham University got its charter. And yeah, I was interviewed in London. I think that's how I got it. Yeah.
But you were saying you'd been to Nottingham.
I had already
before.
been about a year or so before. And as I say, I thought it was a super place. So I was very pleased to be going there. Mm.
And what was it like? Can you remember your first day at university?
Yes, I went on the train. Very sad to say goodbye to my mother on Bath Station. Changed at Derby, got a taxi from the university. But I think in those days, you used to send your clothes on or your goods on in a trunk the day before. So that used to go on, so you just had a suitcase or something with you. And when I arrived, I was introduced to this woman who was the warden or warder, and allocated my room, which I found the other girl who I shared with was already there, and her clothes were in the wardrobe, and she looked to be a far more sophisticated girl than I was from her clothes. Yeah, she was a London girl. Yeah.
Now, I remember you telling me before that was quite something. I mean, you know, a miner's daughter studying at
yes,
university.
Yes, it was, I think. It was. And in a getting to know you meeting, one of the second year students had got a few of the first year students together and nastily had gone round asking, what does your dad do? And I was very naive and I said, my dad's a miner. Oh, well, never mind. That was the answer I got. So, yeah. I could have said he was a mine official.
Yeah.
That probably would have put it up a peg. But, you know, what's wrong, you know? But
So was there any kind of division like that in the university then? Did you feel that with the students, that there was a sort of a middle class, working class?
sorry, would you repeat that?
Was there a kind of a division in the school or in the university itself?
Not
amongst the
really.
students?
No, not really. No, you know, you got to know other students and got on quite well with them. But mostly, I mean, they were people in business, teachers' children, you know, that type of thing, really. Yeah.
And was university everything you had hoped for?
It was at first. I mean, it's quite thrilling, really, to be going to lectures and wearing your gown and meeting
to
a
wear a gown,
professor.
did you?
Oh, yes, I had to wear your gown. It was a very easy life, really, because I had 8 lectures a week. That was all. And 1 seminar meeting. But of course, doing English literature, you had to spend a lot of time in the library, reading, making notes. So really, I was quite busy, but it didn't, on paper, it didn't look as I was. Yeah, we used to go on the lake boating, go into Nottingham, because there was a bus from the university into Nottingham. So it was quite an interesting introduction, I think, to university life.
Did you continue to enjoy it then? As time
First year or so, and perhaps the second year, and then whether because by this time I'd met Ian and other things were opening up, I think I got a little bored with it, really. You know, it didn't seem such a challenge, or perhaps a little bit monotonous as well. So I was quite glad when the end came, really, so I could be doing something else.
Now so it was a degree in English that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
obtained. And at that time you weren't required to do any training as far as teaching was concerned?
Not as teaching, and in fact, when I graduated, I came home for a while, and then I went back to Nottingham and stayed with friends of Ian, and we decided to be married, although he still had a year to do at university because he was an ex-serviceman, so he was a bit behind me. And we married, and he was still a student, and it was found necessary that I went to work to earn some money. So I applied to a school, and easy peasy, you know, you were in, because they were so short of teachers, I think. So I learnt teaching the hard way. But at the end of the year, I did have a full inspection, and my probationary year was granted, and I was accredited then, so I was accredited qualified teacher.
So it was this probationary year was needed to get your...
Oh yes,
your
I to be
license,
qualified, yeah.
So what was it like teaching at Nottingham?
Well, as I say, the school I was in a very poor area, but it was a very, very disciplined school. But it was run by a headmistress who treated us with the same discipline that the children were treated with. So as a staff, you were very much kept under your thumb. And we had a certain style of writing, handwriting, which is called Marion Richardson writing, which was done with a special sort of pen. And she used to come round and inspect the books where you were teaching, and if there was a loop on a letter or something wrong on a letter, you know, and she'd stand in the class and tell the teacher off. So, I mean, it was like that. So it wasn't very enjoyable, really, but it brought the money in. So I was earning some money. And I was there for 18 months, and I was pregnant then. And she didn't like to see me pregnant because she was a spinster lady, you know. You ought to wear something, you know, to cover it up. So anyway, I left, you know, at due time. And we had our first son in Nottingham then.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
And Ian was still a student then, but then life got so hard because we were in a furnished flat and the rent of the flat took half of the money he had. And in the end we came home to Radstock to my parents and stayed with them for a year, and I went to teach in Colford then.
Really?
For school, and Mum looked after the baby. Yeah.
What did it feel like coming back to Radstock?
Well, very different, I suppose, but nice, because I felt at home here, of course. And quite hard, because I used to cycle to Colford School from Radstock every day, which was probably very good for me.
Yeah.
Until I found there was a bus I could use, and I used to go on the bus afterwards. The school was very small, it was just 4 classes in a sort of prefab building. I think that had been used for something in the war. But it was all right, and then that school was amalgamated into Rithington School in Radstock. But by that time, Ian had been given a job in Wales, and we moved to Wales.
Now, how did the school at Colford compare with Nottingham?
Well, it's very small, of course. More friendly, I suppose, because country children are different from town children, I suppose. And it was just, I suppose, easier, really, and quite enjoyable.
When would you say that you came to realise that you enjoyed teaching?
I think when I was in Rithington School.
So you took some time out after...
I took some time out because after we lived in Nottingham, we moved to Wales, and that's when I started having the rest of the family. And of course I stayed home then, to look after the children. And by the time we moved from Wales, our youngest child, the 5th, was 2.5. So we moved to Doncaster, where Ian got another job. And as I was saying, the people next door, the man next door was deputy head of a school. When he heard I'd been a teacher, he asked me to go in and do some part-time teaching in school, which was very close and it's very handy. And it was a good way of getting back into teaching, really, although part-time for a couple of years, and I did some full-time there. But it was English or remedial work as well.
Now that was in the 70s?
That was in the 70s, yeah.
And then you eventually moved back down here?
And then we moved, and Ian was moved to Bristol, or he got a job in Bristol, and we moved back here. And after a while we got the job in Peasdown, and with 5 expensive children, I needed to go to work again. So I wrote to the headmaster of Rithington School and said, please. And I had an interview there and I was in. And I started part-time teaching there, and then gradually became a full-time teacher. And that's when I really enjoyed it. The staff were nice, circumstances were nice, the conditions were nice. I enjoyed what I was doing.
You were saying that it had changed quite a lot in those years.
It had changed because when I worked in Nottingham, in Borwell rather, it was very regimented. And if anybody came into the classroom, the whole class stood up, stood quiet until the person went out again. But that had all changed by the time I came into Rithington, and children were more mouthy, had more feeling of their rights by then. And one incident, I think this is what you mean, was one little boy, he was 11, very fidgety boy, and I was standing at the front saying something, and he disappeared under the desk. And I said to the boy next to him, I said to him, Kevin, whatever's the matter, what are you doing? And the boy next to him said, it's all right, miss, he's got a worm up his bum. And I knew then things had changed. Yeah.
For the better, would you say, or not?
Very much harder for teaching. I mean, you were giving a performance to entertain them as much. I mean, they were used to being entertained, watching the telly, having a lot of freedom. I suppose the children I taught, mainly remedial children who had learning difficulties, but in quite fair-sized groups, perhaps 15, 18 groups. And learning really wasn't their first priority. They wanted to be out on the farm with Dad or mucking about, you know, so it was a bit of a struggle and it was harder really.
Now you said you carried on until you retired, of course.
I did, yeah. In fact, after I retired when I was 58, but I had been dealing with children, with a girl particularly, with quite severe learning difficulties in the school. And I was asked if I would go in and just teach her on certain days in the week. And I did 2 or 3, a couple of boys and a girl like that for years until I had quite a severe illness. And that's when I left. I was at home, perhaps before I was ill. And there was a need to have children who had been excluded from school educated, and they were allowed a day a week of lessons. And I was asked if I would do that, and several boys came to my house, say for a morning, and had their lessons from me then. Whether it did them any good, I don't know. I can't imagine with the small amount of time they had. Really, the school they'd come from wasn't really interested in giving any backup, really. And sometimes they would turn up, sometimes they wouldn't, and they pleased themselves. And then I was ill. That was when I was ill after that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Now, am I right? You're still doing some teaching now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a voluntary assistant, really. After I'd recovered, I realised I needed to be doing something. And I went to what was then the Volunteer Bureau, which was on Wells Hill in what is now the funeral parlour. There was a volunteer bureau in there. And they had a request thing on the board and said they needed some people at the college to help out. So I went for an interview and I was asked if I would go in and help with basic English. And there was a basic English class being run in the Methodist Church in Radstock. So I went there and helped out with that. And then I was asked if I'd go and do some computing with people who had learning difficulties. Well, I'd never done any computing. They said, go along, have a go. So I went along and gradually learnt what computing I know from the tutor as she was teaching the others and helping the others. And now I go in on Monday mornings and help a group like that, and on Tuesday mornings and help with them. And enjoy it, because although some of them can't read, some of them have some behaviour difficulties, they are, because of the skills of the tutor, they are a very organised group with expectations. They are shown respect, and they are expected to do things, but they are respected as well. And they can send emails with the help of the person who can help them with their writing, you know, with the words. They can make posters. They're brilliant. They can look things up on the internet. And they remember, it's odd, they can remember the functions of the computer far better than I do.
Is that right?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It is really amazing, yeah.
So you left the university residence after the first year? Or?
After the first year. You were allowed to be in there for the first year anyway. But I found it very regimented. And a friend of mine had found some digs in Sherwood, which is just outside the city of Nottingham. And she said, why don't you come and share with me? And I've got a lovely landlady. So I thought, well, I'd have more freedom then. So I went there as well. But it makes me smile now. We had to share a bed.
Really?
Yeah, that was, I mean, people didn't think anything of it then. You wouldn't expect 2 students to do it now, I don't think.
Isn't that queer? How
Yeah,
that's
yeah, it really was. And she left after a year, and I stayed on until the end of my course.
Was it about the same cost to stay there as it was at the residence?
I can't work it out. I used to pay £56 a term in the university hall, and she used to charge me under £2 a week, and that was for doing the washing, for meals, for everything.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, wow. Now, you said you met Ian at university.
At university, in the beginning of the second year, my second year then, because that's when he'd come up. And
do you remember meeting him?
I remember meeting him. There's a lovely grass area outside. And it was summer, I suppose. We were sitting outside. And I suppose we'd eyed each other up before then, but he did come across and talk to me. And I can remember he was very boastful that he was a mining engineer, and he was used to getting up at such and such a time in the morning. And I said, well, my dad's a miner, and he's been used to getting up. And it took the wind out of his sails, I think, a bit. Because it was fate, wasn't it, really? You know, that he should meet me and I should meet him, that I understood what he was about, and he was able to appreciate what sort of life I'd led as well.
Yeah.
Because he had lived with mining families when he was evacuated to Wales. So that made him coming to Radstock and staying in Waterloo Road with me, with the outside loo, easier, you know. He had been used to that sort of conditions.
How did you get on with your dad?
Oh, all right. I mean, Dad was very respectful. But Ian gets on well with anybody. You know, he really does, yeah. So he's fine.
Now, you met at Nottingham, and you said you got married up there, did you?
Yes, we did. We didn't tell anybody. We decided to get married. He got a licence, and we were married in the registry office in Nottingham. And at lunchtime at college, before that, I said to this friend who I'd shared the digs with, would you like to come and be our witness at the wedding? Ian said the same to a mate of his. We went off to the registry office. I didn't have any special clothes or anything. And we got married. And as we came out, there was a photographer waiting on the step. And he said, is this a wedding? We said, no. And we went to Derby for a very wet weekend. And that was our honeymoon.
So, do you have any wedding photographs then?
Do we have?
Any wedding photographs?
No.
You don't have
nothing.
any?
Nothing.
Really?
Nothing. No.
And how did your parents react?
Oh, well, I had told, because we were engaged. We had been engaged to be married for about 6 months before that. And my dad didn't like that either, because he didn't want me to get married yet, you know. And I had said to Mum, that's how I'd like to be married. And I'd seen the trouble that weddings can cause in families, because Ian's parents, they were quite conventional, and weddings, you know, presents and clothes and all that. I thought, I don't want that. We just do it quietly. So Mum took it very well. Dad was upset, and took him a little while, because he thought I was pregnant. You know, you would, wouldn't you? Everybody thought I was pregnant. And Ian's mother, she found it very upsetting, because she would have liked the wedding. But in the end, it all came out all right. And we've never regretted it. I mean, we are.
Yeah.
50, however many years later, 49 we were married.
So that's 55, isn't it, this year?
Yeah.
Wow. That's quite a spell.
Yeah.
Audrey, I'm going to say thank you
Right,
now
yeah.
and turn it off. But it's been a very interesting chat.
Oh, right.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
I, as I say, chatting, I hope it's not rubbish, but if it is, wipe out the rubbish.
No, not at all.
No, right.
No, thank you again.
Right, pleasure.